Okay, so this video is, I want to talk about the heart types in relationships. And I think this helped me to find my heart fix, or to see it more clearly. So I've had a relationship with only a few women, and all of them, they were each of the heart types. And I noticed distinctly how they relate, the relationship style, and how each type is, how different they are, and yet how similar. Excuse me. So we'll go with the two first. The two is expect a lot of love and attention. It's pretty much what you'd expect with the type 2, calling you all the time, a lot of affection, physical affection, PDA. They are often very attractive themselves, and they will quickly move into an intimate place. So expect a relationship that moves quickly, especially if you have a sexual first type 2. I'll talk a little bit about the stackings as well and how I've found that they show up. So the type 2, you find quite a few sexual first type 2s, actually, more so than you would sexuals of maybe a different type, because that's the heart center, and they're the most effusive of the heart center. You're looking at generosity, pride, and it's not just helpfulness. When you're in a relationship with them, it's more about attention, and them giving you attention and looking good for you, and having some possessiveness over you too. It can be the darker side of 2, where it becomes, it goes to 8, and the person can be very possessive and controlling and coercing you into staying with them, and it can get to be too much. They offer an amazing relationship. Often they'll be willing to commit for life even. They're serious romance people, the type 2. But you have to be prepared for what you're getting into with them. They have so much love and affection, and they see themselves in a very positive way too. They see both parties in a positive way. So expect a lot of love, sex. They like sex. They're into that. That's part of love for them. Expect someone who's sexually open, and their appearance can be very seductive, and they know how to get sort of under your skin in a way. They know how to take control. This is the most, not the most, I mean, in some ways the most aggressive relationship person. They're the one that's most likely to pursue, outside of the gender expectations. With men, expect them to be a little bit more feminine and surprisingly sweet, and things they wouldn't normally be for a man. And then with women, expect them to be pursuing. They like to do that, and they can be kind of predatory, but they can be very funny and full of emotion. You can identify them. They wear more makeup. There's this kind of often playing with makeup in a way that's, they want it to look natural, but they're not really. They don't want you to know they're covering things up, but they know there's an exaggerated way that they kind of doll themselves up. They have a youthfulness about them. They often look younger than they are, and they can have some of that going on. So I thought they were pretty easy to identify in a relationship. It's very much about you and them flattering you, and how much they love you, and how devoted they are, and how much time you want to spend together. It's what you would expect. So the biggest issue is it could become too much for you. Especially if I'm a type 8, and we like autonomy, and we can want to keep the 2 at arm's length. It can lead to resentment, because it becomes this obligation of, we haven't talked enough, we haven't spent enough time together. And they also can control the person, keep the person kind of locked in with them, so that they don't go to other people. They can be very jealous. They can be very needy, and that can be problematic. It either goes one way or the other with them. Either you kind of engage with them and accept who they are and how loving and relational they are, or you go your separate ways. It can be hard to be in between with them. They can be competitive, bitter breakups, and quickly moving on, and triangulation, and some deception and so forth with 3 right there. So all right, so yeah, more sexual dominance of the 2, and a sexual quality and effusive communication style. I'm kind of in your face about love and romance. It can be saccharine the way it's love songs and romance and longing. There's something beautiful about it too, though. It's genuine. They genuinely love people, and they have more depth there than others do. They understand that there's self-sacrifice, there's other orientedness, there's all this devotion that has to come from love, and they're willing to put that effort in usually as well, when healthier. So, okay, next, I'll go to 4 next, actually. And then we'll swing around to get to 3. But with the 4, expect kind of the opposite in some ways. They're emotional, but they play hard to get, and they hold back. So expect, inaccessibility. You sort of have to arrange things with them. They can be more formal as they, go to 1 with a 1 line. And you have to sniff them out a little bit more. They won't do as much pursuing. They might do a little bit. They might give you a hint, but then they'll pull back. And I would expect more sexual seconds with the type 4, because the sexual instinct is very much about, meeting the person and merging and relationships. And the 4s really aren't about that very much. They have a withdrawn element, but they're in the heart. They're very much an emotional type. They're one of the outer heart types, and there's this, they pull inwards, and there's a deeper, resonant emotional world in there. So you find more in the sexual second space for instincts, and they can be very seductive in the way they play hard to get. You want to go after them. You want to chase them more, and they can be mysterious. They generally look strange. They have a strange look to them. They dress like an artist. They dress funky. They do their makeup differently. Sometimes their features are a little bit different. They can have a strange, unique look about them, so they stand out. They can be angular or, grotesque or striking in some ways, and they have a way of emphasizing that. So they stand out, and they can blend in with other people like them. They can start to look like other artists, other goths or punks or whatever. They can start to borrow from each other, and you could see 4s that fit a pattern, especially when they have a social instinct. But expect them to be kind of self-absorbed, and with a line to 2, they can be clingy at times. They can be subordinative. They can be very sexual in their wants and needs. In some ways, they can be like a 2, because once they're really involved, they can seem manipulative as well, and they'll want to hang out, and they'll make themselves available, but it's in a less active way. They'll just kind of show up, and then it's almost like they're not ready or something, and they're in a weird mood, or they're just a bit awkward. And that's something you can identify about them. And, expect the tragic romance, the drama, the, long distance, and just kind of bittersweet romance, and not connecting maybe as much as you would like. They often don't talk as much. They're not as big of talkers, because they tend to be withdrawn, introverted type of people. So they're very good listeners. And, all of the heart types surprisingly don't talk as much as you would think, unless they have a very strong social. They're just not, they're extroverted, but you have to go to the 2 usually for somebody that's really, really talkative and outgoing. And they just, depends on the trifix, but they tend to be very good listeners. So for an extroverted person, they can be good. I think maybe that's, with me, for some reason, all of the women, they like me, the heart types. Maybe because 8 goes to 2, or maybe there are just a lot of type 2 women, or sorry, heart type women out there. But they come on to me for some reason, or whatever. That's the way it seems to go. And, you know, I'm attracted to them as well, but I suppose I don't chase women that often, and that's something that I've observed, that it helps to wait for them to approach first. And so with 4, they're very sensitive. All of the heart types are sensitive. They're sensitive to emotions. What you say to them, they're going to remember it. They keep tabs on you. I mean, this was the relationship triad in the original Enneagram from Machazo. It's the heart space, it's the sexual space. All of these align. And in relationships, you know, you probably find more heart types just in relationships, wanting to be in a relationship with you. They don't really want to be alone because their identity is built on you know, how they're received by others, and what better way to do that than through intimacy. So you do find them wanting to be in relationships regardless of the stacking. And, you know, so with the 4, there's more of a sexual second, you know, kind of commonality there. You don't find many that are SX last. And they can be very emotional and intellectual. And often the relationships have ups and downs and can be unconventional. They may be reluctant to give it a name and say, well, I'm not really the girlfriend type, or what do you mean get married? I mean, they see that has a way of kind of diminishing it by stereotyping it. So they can be more unique, you know, where it's just you and me, and I don't like to define what we are. And it can be kind of non-committal and a little bit vague for other people, but they feel it, and they know that relationships are defined by truth and authenticity and what's really going on and the heart connection there. So they trust that it'll work out as it needs to, but it can put pressure on the relationship to be so, you know, what's going on here kind of vibe, and you sometimes odd couplings and mismatches, because the 4 really doesn't get along with anybody that they're close to, you know. So the person they go with for romance often is designed to be very different from them, and for there to be that contrast. And then the people they connect with, relate to, is kind of their friends more maybe, but there's something tragic about the romances where they just can't seem to get on the same page as the person, and that can lead to problems, and they tend to be independent. They often will break it off first, and they can pull away and so forth. And with 2 there, they can enter new relationships as well. And so very artistic, relationship oriented people, but they have kind of a darker view of relationships and can be hard for them to settle down and commit. Much different from the 2. Finally, you're looking with the 3, also a relationship person. They're in the heart triad, but they're kind of the non-heart triad heart type. So you find more SX last 3s. You find a higher number of these. They want relationships. Keep in mind, relationship isn't just sexual. That's a particular part of relationships. And 3s, being a heart type, being an image type, again, they want relationships often, even when they're sexual last. You find many social over self-pressed 3s. And they're common in career world, and they kind of have that balance, and they'll use social kind of to stand in for sexual. So they won't go for as much intense intimacy and all this stuff, but they'll build a friendship, and they'll build, you know, a connection and reciprocity, with sexual still being the motivator, you know, within the repressed place there. So they'll be going for people that they want sexually, but it has a more detached quality to it on the emotional level. Expect an intellectual connection, common respect. With efficiency as part of their fixation, they also like to move pretty quickly. They want to get it done. You know, it can be quick communication, brief, to the point, but they establish pretty quickly what's going on. And, it's not over the top like with the two. It's not all this stuff, da, 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 I love you, all this and that, and wanting to talk for 2 hours on the phone. It's not that. It's much more efficient, to the point, more moderate. You talk a bit, you check in. There's something, almost technical about the way it's done. They're easy to get a hold of, they're available, but it's not a lot of hovering around necessarily. It's kind of a midpoint there. And there can be, again, with the makeup and the way they present themselves, this is more true for women because I'm a man, but in terms of just presentation, whether it's man or woman, with threes, they look almost like models some of the time. They have a porcelain quality. They kind of fix themselves up. They can be almost blank, more of a blank porcelain model-esque quality to them. And you find that it's much different from the two or the four. With the four, it's more of this brooding, dark, kind of strange artistic, Edward Scissorhands or kind of Tim Burton land stuff often in the modern day, not always, but it's closer to that, with the messed up hair and kind of a natural, authentic, or something more tragic. If you go to Japan, Japan is very fourish, something kind of offbeat, the gothic Lolita thing, more eccentric, sometimes freaky styles with the fours. Okay, and then the two is almost like a classic beauty. I mean, they really dress up with the makeup, and it can be a little bit too much with the permed hair, or they look really beautiful and kind of glamorous, but it's almost too much. It feels childlike somehow, or exaggerated. And it can go both ways. They can be very seductive, but it can also start to feel kind of like, I don't know, a little bit cheap or something, without wanting to. Not meaning to insult anybody. They're beautiful, and lots of beautiful manifestations of all the types. And beauty is in the eye of the beholder as well. I mean, it's not about what I like or anything like that. It's just kind of what the patterns are. And then with the three, you have something more in the middle. It's more like a model that's very well put together. They'll lean into two or four wing, and they often are extremely well put together. Just everything works together very well, and they stand out for that reason. And again, they can be very sexually attractive. This is one of, for the two and the four, the two and the three really have sexual attractiveness. Naranjo noticed that as one of their traits. It's one of their core, things, and the two has some stuff like that too, of seductiveness. So the three, they want to be attractive, and they prioritize it, and they often take good care of themselves. They're more likely to take, decent care of themselves, and tend to be, not to stereotype, but the effort they're putting into it. There's that effort and that, well put together, polished quality to them. And the relationships can be a bit detached and routine, and intimacy can be a problem. Especially because you often find a sexual last, and they're more common, a lower sexual three, and the fact that they're threes. Intimacy is not necessarily their strong suit. They can be great with sex and affection and love, but it can be kind of compartmentalized in that way just by them being a three. It's like they need a spot in the day where things go, and they're more organized, and they don't let loose as often. It's kind of rehearsed and put on, and now it's time for us to have sex. And it's kind of like, it's a show. It can be very, very over the top, and they can be very aggressive people in relationships. Often they're competitive, so they want that beautiful person or that perfect person for them. They know that you can't just wait for things to come to you. You have to go out there and get that. So they have a drive and a single-mindedness and an efficiency that they don't mince words as much, and they just kind of go in for the kill. And they leave relationships the same way often. It's just kind of in and out, detachment and efficiency. And in the relationship, they can be not the best communicators. You don't necessarily know what's going on. They can be very convincing that they're telling you about the truth and all this, but it's not really true. They're hiding things, or they're hiding how their real feelings or whatever. So I think that those are the main points that I can think of, and how to recognize these types of people in relationships. So if ever someone is pursuing you, aggressively for a relationship, or they just kind of show up, there's a decent chance they're going to be a heart type. There are more heart types on the lookout for relationships, and they're going after them more. Even if it's just coming up to say hi, there's a decent chance, a decent, probability. I don't think it's just me. I mean, I'm sure there's something about me that they like, but I think it's also the statistics and the logic of the fact that they're out there, and that the heart types are a little bit more motivated to seek relationships out. Sometimes there's people chasing them, or they're chasing people, but they have a way of connecting, and always kind of having people on their radar, even if it's just friends. So yeah, I hope that helps. I think that's a little bit how I am in relationships too. Having a 3 fix, I'm more, a little bit more to the point, and like things to be organized and straightforward. It's not too much manipulation, but there can be an intimacy. Sometimes intimacy gets sidetracked, and there's not as much there's not as much focus on the relationship itself. The you and me connection. It's the 3s kind of struggle with that, because they're worried about, doing things perfectly, and kind of performing, and what you're going to think of them, and that kind of thing. So, all right, hope that helps. Talk to you later. Thanks for watching.